it's hard for me to just stand and not talk. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Faisel Syed. I'm the National Director of Primary Care with ChenMed. My background is also community health, and I started my career in community health. I became a doctor. I trained in an unopposed family medicine program in Columbus, Georgia. And I became a doctor specifically for people with little to no resources. So I started at a community health center, a large community health center in Tampa, Florida, Hillsborough County, where we had some of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country, just from not having basic access to care. So at that time in my life, I was focused with what can we do to increase access? What can we do to increase access? And then I get into the community health world, help grow the community health center to the largest one in Florida, fourth or fifth largest in the country. And my constant struggle was how to reduce the number of visits we had per patient per year so we could say that we're serving more lives. And it was very frustrating as a family doctor. Anyways, we went from struggling with trying to, my CEO wanted the visits to be at 1.5 visits per patient per year, and I'm trying to fight for trying to get to 3 visits per patient per year. And then Kismet, I get connected with ChenMed, which is focused on the most vulnerable patients in the community health world. Our average patient's age over 70 years old. So now that this slide is up, we can get started.
Absolutely. And I'm Dan McCarter. I'm the National Director for Primary Care Advancement at ChenMed. I've been here also for about 6 years. 27 years before that, I was full-time faculty at the University of Virginia, doing a number of different roles there. We still have faculty, they just don't pay me. We do have a study class.
We do. So we believe that everyone deserves access to high-quality primary care, regardless of their ability to pay. So just a little bit about ChenMed. ChenMed is almost 40 years in the making in the full risk model. It is physician-led, which was very refreshing for me. Leaving from the community health world, where my CEO's last job was somewhere in the Department of Forestry or something like that. And he had an MBA, so he was the CEO of the largest community health center. We're physician-led from the home office to the divisional level, regional level. Physicians are involved with every decision, down to the level of the care team, leading care teams. And so ChenMed's evolution was with taking on full risk, mastering how to do well on full risk. Managing full risk is really it's a relationship-based model. We talk a lot about the doctor-patient relationship, which is the core, of course, of family medicine, but we forget to talk about the relationship between the centers and the community, restoring those relationships and having those partnerships in the community. The doctor-to-doctor relationship, restoring that relationship, the doctor-to-team relationship. So anyways, ChenMed has almost 40 years with having this relationship-based model with the goal of improving health. And we can get into the pillars of improving health in just a little bit. A little bit about ChenMed. We now have over 120 centers spread across 15 states. We're in the full risk Medicare Advantage space. Our average patient age is 70, 72 with 5 or more chronic medical conditions, and we exist in the same neighborhoods as the community health centers. And
Faisel, I think one thing we should point out is when we were here 2 years ago, is that right? We had 80 offices. We were in about 8 states then, and we're in 15 states now. So in some ways we feel like we're doing the same thing, but when we look back, we are continuing to move. So this is the care team that we have, and I guess you could say the future is here now. So we do have medical assistants, and so the doctor and their medical assistant will take care of a panel of about 450 patients. The goal is for monthly visits, and for the sickest 10% of patients, see them twice a month. And then we, as best we can when we have time available, we have weekly staff calling patients, especially for those sickest 10%. We do the on-site med dispensing. We do have door-to-doctor transportation. And this isn't a typical Medicaid leave people for 3 hours. We actually use Uber and Lyft to bring patients one at a time to our office and then take them back. Very often, our offices are in the same strip malls with grocery stores, and so if they need to get groceries while they're there, they can come to our office, they can go do their shopping, and then let us know. We'll get the Uber to take them home then, so they can have access to whatever is near us at the same time. We coordinate with specialists. We have some specialists in the center. Otherwise, we coordinate with groups of specialists who are like-minded. We offer behavioral health, and then we have case managers that will actually follow patients into the hospital.
I remember when I came and started learning about the full risk model, our orientation and training for every new physician at that time was 3 weeks. Now it's 4 weeks. It's a massive mindset shift for doctors to make, transitioning from the fee-for-service, generating RVUs, and all what we have to deal with as family doctors when we're up against these massive hospital systems who profit and benefit from all the inadequacies of primary care. So I remember when I came, I thought when we were talking about where the waste is in our healthcare delivery system, I thought, oh, when we refer unnecessarily to specialists, or when we overly prescribe brand name drugs when there's generic equivalents available. Yes, those are very massive drivers of waste in our healthcare delivery system, but the main driver of waste is what somebody was talking about earlier, is all the unnecessary emergency room visits that fuel unnecessary hospitalizations, or even go before that with their urgent care system. And so, if you want to know how the money flows, it's not just about addressing the unnecessary specialty referrals. It's not just about the overprescribing of brand name drugs. Those are very distant. You got to reduce all the waste that's happening in our healthcare delivery system, which is unnecessary hospitalizations, people, unnecessary emergency room visits. And the key to plugging that hole is restoring that doctor-patient relationship.
So, how to effectively manage the cost with care? And this actually was from an article published by Robbie Pearl in the Harvard Business Review in January 2020. A lot of people had other things going on then. And the interesting thing, like you're talking about, is the high-cost patients. But he describes this as really breaking down into 3 groups of high-cost patients. So if the top 5% of patients causes 50% of the spend, and we focus on that top 5% if you look at the national population, because our model is pretty expensive to operate, and we need a high risk adjustment to make it work. Well, then when you look at that, there is the early single illness. So that is if a patient goes into the hospital with DKA or they have an MI, and like if I had an MI here today, somebody would do CPR, you'd get me over to one of the local hospitals, they would put a stent in, I would be really expensive this year like you're talking about, and then next year my cost goes back down. And a lot of times when people are coming in, they say, we're going to help you manage your high-cost patients. They will go after everybody that's high cost, and there's fully a third of those that want to progress to the mean next year. So you can show pretty good results, but the problem is people are going to take their place. The catastrophic illness, if getting together this afternoon, going down the road in a major car accident, I become a C2 quad, I'm going to be damn expensive the rest of my life. There's just nothing you're going to do. You can give me virtual care, you can give me case management, you may be able to moderate the cost a little bit, but I'm still going to be high cost, and there's nothing that's going to do much about that. And then you have the complex chronic illness. So if you have the housing insecure patient with diabetes, CKD, and angina, you're not going to be able to send them to the diabetic clinic, the heart failure clinic, the kidney clinic, and high intensity primary care is about the only place you're going to make a difference there. Robbie in his article was talking about this is where Kaiser has seen they've been able to make a difference, and that's where, when you talk about groups like Iora, groups like us, these are the populations we tend to focus on. And then, if you look at what we do have significantly reduced admissions, 30 to 50% compared to fee-for-service Medicare, decreased emergency room visits, decreased cost, and we have increased medication compliance, increased patient satisfaction, and increased quality metrics. This is just showing where we are now. We're gradually moving westward at this point. And this is just our growth curve since when we moved out of Florida in 2011, and this is the growth curve since then. These are the care partners. I did have a slide with all of their logos on them, but I was told I had to get permission from each company to use logos, so I had to take the logos on.
And I remember when this happened, when we got recognized with a Change the World list, somebody sent me a text, and I said, my God, what is this? And I sent a text to my CEO and Chief Medical Officer, Chris and Gordon. I said, did you guys know about this thing? I said, no, we had no idea. And it turns out that when you design a model that's focused on improving health and you make money by improving health, you make money by having a culture of how to respond to patients with prevention who are resistant or flippant, you make money. You know, if you have a system and a culture where you don't call an unscheduled patient a walk-in, you call the unscheduled patients in need, and suddenly the entire staff rise up and they remember, this is why I became a doctor. This is why I became a nurse. If they don't roll their eyes when a patient shows up unscheduled or a patient calls. That's the second pillar. Early intervention is the culture of how do we respond to patients who show up unscheduled. And then, of course, easing of suffering. You know, we know that most Americans, we don't want to die naked in a hospital or in a nursing home, institutionalized. But sadly, that's somewhere between 7 to 8 out of 10 Americans are going to die that way. And so when you restore the doctor-patient relationship, we know that the act of physicians, we know that the act of dying isn't just the moments before the heart stops beating. But it turns out that once you have teams who are intimately connected with the patients in the final years of their lives, they are able to die with dignity, and you end up changing the world when you have a model that does well.
So when we were here 2 years ago, I don't think our presentation was a whole lot different than it is now. So Christian, our CEO, the question is, how can we scale faster? And how do we scale the simple rather than thinking about the overwhelming complexity? So how do we keep building more centers with good PCPs, good teams, having these relationships with the patients?
So the mindset, there's a couple core mindset shifts that must happen in order to be successful with looking after a population of patients. First of all, doctors just focused on a small panel of patients. Our average panel size is about 370, 380. We cap the doctors at 450 patients because really, I mean, to be able to restore that trust, especially in the first, I'd say, 12 to 18 months, when the patients are used to just going to the emergency room or urgent cares for most of their healthcare delivery, it takes that much time, not only for the patients, but for the doctors too, for us too. And so for the doctors, they must have that mindset that to not be satisfied. They're so used to running through their days, and actually to make an impact, you have to have that growth mindset that I must open my mind with learning. We're learning about how to earn trust. We're learning how to respond to patients who are resistant or flippant to whatever advice I'm giving.
Right, and it's sort of people coming from the fee-for-service world, we have to figure out how to get them to unlearn those bad habits, to relearn the new habits.
And then being accountable. So being accountable, I remember when I at my community health center, we were really happy when we had over 100,000 lives, 40,000 patients were unfunded. And I remember we had 40% of our patients vaccinated against influenza. And we were so happy. We were so happy that, my God, look at us. We didn't even have 2 visits per patient per year, and we're at the national average. You know, we're at 40%. And then I came to ChenMed, I joined as a primary care doctor, and I remember that first year, I had 60% of my patients vaccinated against influenza, which is a big deal to me. And I was so excited, and nobody even batted an eye. Nobody at the center. I said, do you guys realize I have 60% of my patients vaccinated against influenza? And they said, yeah, but you know, our doctors have 80, 90% plus patients. There's a doctor in New Orleans who has 98, 99% of his patients vaccinated against influenza every year. And then, you know, I'm the typical doctor, and I said, well, obviously, his patients aren't as resistant as mine. You know, obviously, his patients aren't as difficult as mine. And they said, well, actually, he's in the zip code where the life expectancy is only 54 or 56, arguably the most prevention-hesitant population in the United States. So I said, well, he's got to be a master of the English language. And I remember calling him, and I said, Dr. Kumar, how are you doing this? and actually had very broken English. And I was shocked. I was shocked that he didn't have a master's degree. I was expecting to speak with somebody who was like a Jedi with language and motivational interviewing and all that. And all he said was, Faisel, I don't judge the patients. I don't judge the patients. I assume that most people are going to come to me and whatever they say, it doesn't matter what they say. You know, number one, last time I got the flu shot, I gave me the flu, right? And he said, I just assumed they're going to say, last time I got the flu shot, it made my head fall off. And he stays with them. He said, oh my God, I wouldn't want to get the flu shot either. No matter what they say, I wouldn't get it either. And he said, when you get to that step, you have already passed 9 out of 10 physicians in the country, just by getting to that step there. And I learned from that, and now I'm one of the 90+ club. So having that mindset to be accountable for these health outcomes, you know, not being happy by just offering a preventive service and saying, well, the patient accepted it, I offered it, they accepted it, I'm God's gift of medicine. No, having the accountability to actually influence positive behavior changes in the patients. That's the beauty of when you have the time to be able to do it.
So the population mindset, again, part of this is how you're thinking about the patients that aren't right in front of you today. Are you making sure you're getting the right patients in for care? And they're often, it's a lot of times training is about how you take care of who shows up in your exam room. But there are a lot of people that aren't in our exam room every day, and when we're taking full financial risk, we have to be constantly looking at what's going on there. And if we can't get them in, then we need to send a case manager, do we need to send a community paramedic to their house? Do we just need to drive them crazy with text messages until they will actually come in?
So, of course, you know, we know that we as family physicians can do much more than what our hospital-based healthcare delivery system, well, I don't want to say asks of us. I mean, they really demand of us. That they look at us, they look at primary care through a very, very limited scope. They're lucky if you look at us with referral. We need you to do referral renewals. We need you to refill medications, and if you're lucky, you get to do a wellness visit. And we know that primary care is much, much more than that. Primary care is public health. Public health is our space of primary care. Of course it is. So-called urgent care when patients need help, of course that's our space too. Most of the non-interventional specialty care, why in the world would we send that out to somebody else? You know, so of course these are spaces, this is family medicine, this is how we were trained. And so when we talk about restoring the doctor-to-doctor relationship, it reminds me of when I was in residency and all the curbsiding we did at the doctor's office. I never had to do a formal consult, and most of the time we'd curbside. You know, the specialist would give us, well, you're on the right track, keep on moving in that track. And so when you get rid of all the administrative work that comes with generating RVUs and CPT codes and all that, and you're just all aligned on one thing, with improving health, and suddenly you're able to restore many of the relationships that unfortunately right now are fragmented in our current model.
So if anybody's interested, Gordon and Chris have written a book about the history of the company and some of the things they went in building the company, and the company will be happy to send you a copy of the book for free. So this is a QR code you can scan for that. That is really all we have today. We're welcome to answer any questions that you might have.
It's an incredibly open book. I mean, it's a family-run business. Almost imagine, well, up until recently, what the family just got out of the operations in the last few months. But the book is very open about all the struggles and all the challenges you can imagine with becoming successful in the full risk model. So I encourage you all, if you're interested, to get a copy of that book, and they'll send it for free.